following is a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
Welcome to the System is Down.
What's up, sports fans? I mean downers. Welcome back to the least comfortable show on the web, The System is Down. My name is Dan Smots, and if you're new here, this is a place where we typically talk about conspiracies, politics, religion, and all things uncomfortable. And today, February 5th, 2018, is my 30th birthday. That's right, happy birthday to me. And if you had told me 5 years ago that on my 30th birthday I would be hosting a podcast talking about sports, I would have said, 1, what's a podcast? And 2, no. Because for those of you who do know me and know my background, you know that I have zero interest in sports typically. That it is the bottom of the barrel of my interest and entertainment level. However, yesterday was Super Bowl Sunday. I'm recording this beforehand, of course, so I don't know if there was anything obviously shady that went on or any strange occurrences that were visible. I don't even know for sure if I'm going to watch the Super Bowl. There's a good chance I might turn on for the halftime show. But all that aside, my guest on today's show is Brian Tuohy, who is an author and the go-to guy for conspiracies based around fixing and rigging of sports games. He's been on different shows like Alex Jones's InfoWars and, of course, my personal favorite, Greg Carlwood's The Higher Side Chats. And all of his research and claims has been the one thing that's been able to spark a little bit of interest for me to look into some sports things. So it's a really interesting conversation, and I want to get into it as quickly as possible. But before we do, I got to mention a couple things. First off, being a big shout out to Casey Gallenberger for sending me an article to Brian Tuohy's information and all the stuff that he's digging into. Casey sent me that link through the System is Down forum, which is a place where everybody is able to come and have uncomfortable conversations and just talk about all the weird stuff that's going on in the world. You can throw out ideas for the show, different guest possibilities, or just come in and chat with some similar-minded weirdos. You can find that by going to tsidpod.com/forum, or just by going to facebook.com and typing in the System is Down forum. It is a closed group, so you'll have to ask to join, but if you look like a human, I'll let you in right away. Also, if you haven't heard or you're not already a member, we have the Downers Club for just $1 a month. That is where you can help support the show, help give a little bit back, and in return, you get tons of bonus audio content every single week. Lately, we've been doing 3 to 4 episodes a week in addition to Monday's free episode, so you're getting way more than you pay for 4 quarters. We cover the news, we play games, we do movie reviews, we do extended interviews with some of our guests, and all sorts of other fun stuff. So go check that out for zero risk. You can sign up for $1, try it for a month. If you don't like it, no hard feelings, move along on your merry way. But I guarantee you're going to like what you hear. If you want to be a member and support us, you can do so by going to tsidpod.com/support and join the Downers Club. All right, now on to the good stuff. My conversation with Brian Tuohy, where he tells me all about sports rigging conspiracies, and I make it even more painfully obvious that I know nothing about sports. So, all that said, and without further ado, let's get weird. My guest today is the author of the books The Fix Is In, Larceny Games, and A Season in the Abyss. Brian Tuohy, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I am fantastic, and I don't mess around here. I shoot straight. I tell it how it is. This is our second time doing this intro because my recording didn't work. So, I will edit it, but if we have any awkward breaks, that's what happened. So, Take 2. Brian, you're the guy. You're the go-to guy for fixing and rigging of sports. You literally wrote the book. You wrote multiple ones of it on the idea. Now, I am not a sports guy by any stretch. I have the mental equivalent of a toddler when it comes to sports. So when you're getting into this, you'll have to really break it down for me and speak simply. But I know that, for me, I still find it extremely interesting. And this is something that I suspected was going on without any real evidence. And I believe that a lot of our listeners feel the same way.
Well, yeah, and like I said to you before, funny thing. But for people who don't like sports and may listen to your show, I think it is worth listening to just because what I've run into in my investigations and when my books came out and how the media reacted to what I uncovered, I think is very telling because, what I write about is sports. And to me, that's really not that important. I mean, it is a big business. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Hmm.
But at the same time, compared to other things going on in the world, it's not that big of a deal yet. The reaction I've gotten and how I've been in many ways censored by the major media like ESPN and Sports Illustrated and others, I think goes to show that the media always has a say and control over what we see and hear and think in many ways. So I think even though this is probably all going to be about sports, you can apply it to other areas of life.
Absolutely. What do you think is the reason for this sports boom in our society, in our culture? Like, it is everywhere, it is everything, and it's guys playing a game. I mean, can you
No, I
break
know
that down?
exactly what you're saying. I mean, I think in many ways it actually, and it's sad, but I think it relates back to Roman times and the gladiators.
Hmm.
I mean, that's why they had the gladiator contests was basically to distract the populace and get them interested in something besides what was going on within the political realm. And I think in many ways today, it fills that same void. In many ways, sports is entertainment, and it is something that the leagues claim to be. They claim to be entertainment, but at the same time, it's a huge distraction. It's a huge distraction for millions upon millions of people who care more about sports than they do what goes on in their everyday lives. And it's scary that, certain people, including like my brother, could name the lineup of the 1984 Cubs with no problem,
Right.
but ask him who his state senator is or even who his congressman is, and he'd throw up his hands and go, I don't know.
Sure.
So it's amazing what we know and what we don't know and how much sports has taken over in our lives.
Sure. Is that? I mean, I want to get into the actual topic here, but curious. Do you think that this distraction is who is conducting that? What is it distracting from? I mean, there's a bunch of different levels of conspiracy people, and
Yeah.
just curious as to where you fall on that spectrum.
Well, I mean, it's hard to say, because it's not something I really look into. I just recognize that it is a major distraction, but it
Sure.
is interesting when you look at sports, how much of it is funded by the government.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's something that a lot of people don't really consider and think about. But I mean, many stadiums, baseball stadiums, football stadiums, hockey stadiums, basketball stadiums are funded and given free land by local government or given tax breaks by the government. So in many ways, government funds professional sports, and in many ways, they give them, like I say, tax breaks. They give them antitrust breaks. They give them a lot of latitude to operate. So in
Mhm.
many ways, like I say, the government does support the professional sports leagues. And even if you look at college sports, which to me is frightening, on a state level in college sports, I think it's something like out of the 50 states, something like 41 or 42 of the states, the highest paid public employee is either a basketball or football coach,
Wow.
which is just scary. I mean, to think
Yeah.
that like I live in Wisconsin, the highest paid public employee in the state of Wisconsin is the football head coach at the University of Wisconsin.
Not somebody like impacting lives or making
Exactly.
decisions that
Yeah, it's not the governor, it's not a state senator, it's the freaking football coach.
Oh, good Lord. So what made you start digging into this type of thing? What made you, suspect that there was something going on and start doing your research?
Well, I almost did it by accident. I mean, I actually started off as a screenwriter, and my wife told me to write a book and stop writing these stupid screenplays. So the only thing that kind of interested me was sports, and I was always kind of a conspiracy theorist amongst other things.
Mhm.
And so I thought, well, maybe I'll do a book on sports conspiracies. And as I kind of dug around into the subject, I came to realize that this was a topic that no one really ever talked about.
Right.
This idea that professional sports could be basically being controlled by the leagues themselves and altering outcomes for their own benefit, basically.
Hmm.
And so once I kind of dug into this and once I released my first book, which was The Fix Is In, once I started doing some publicity for it, I realized nobody was talking about game fixing, either on this conspiracy level or even on like a gambling level.
Hmm.
And so I thought, this is a void, and I guess I kind of fell into the void and filled it, and so it just took off from there.
Very cool. So you were a hardcore sports fan at the time. Has that changed knowing what you know now?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, I was a huge sports fan growing up. I mean, my dad, Little League Baseball and all that sort of thing. But as I got older, I got more cynical. And especially as I started digging more and more into this stuff, I mean, it was always interesting because I would read sports books as a kid and, it'd be 300 pages of fluff, but there'd be like 2 or 3 pages that talked about, drug abuse or some other sort of dark side of the game. And I was always like, well, why isn't there more about that?
Right.
I don't care what the coach said. I don't care what happened in the locker. I care about this kind of dirt stuff. So really what I did in many ways is stitched a lot of that dirt I found in all these books together to make my first book.
Okay.
And that was what interested me. That's what really got me going, was the fact that there was dirt. There was, clear evidence of gambling, of drug usage, of, performance enhancing drug usage and all these things. And yet that wasn't what was pushed forward. That was always kind of almost kept off the books as much as possible. But that's what I found interesting.
Sure. Now break down kind of the general idea of the conspiracy here. Is it simply just them choosing the outcomes of the games, or is there more to it there?
Well, I look at game fixing from two angles. And one, like I said, is the gambling end of it, where organized crime or gamblers would pay players, coaches, or referees to alter the outcome of a game. And that we know, not many people admit to it, but we know around the world right now, like in soccer, in tennis, in cricket, and rugby, it's actually rampant, and it's going on everywhere around the world.
Really?
Yeah, everywhere but the United States. And like I say, if you don't follow soccer, you probably never heard of it. If you don't follow tennis, I mean, tennis is the second most bet upon sport in the world.
Oh.
And nobody seems to know it. And the fact is that many tennis matches have been fixed and fixed for gamblers. So, I mean, these are known facts. Of course, in the United States, we say it never happens. It never could happen. But elsewhere around the world right now, it is happening, yeah. Mm-hmm. And the other aspect, like what the fix is in, the book was written about, was this idea of the leagues fixing their own games basically for television purposes and for ratings, because that's where they make their money. Right. I mean, the NFL makes about $11 billion a year now, and over half of that comes directly from the major media for funding for their games. Without, Fox Sports, CBS Sports, ESPN, the NFL's revenue would be cut literally in half, if not more, if they didn't get that. And so I started thinking, well, what would be the best business decision? These are businesses, they're multi-billion-dollar businesses. Right. Wouldn't it behoove them then to control the outcome of these games? Not necessarily every game, but here and there, to make the best storylines, to make the most interesting games possible, so people would tune in every week. And what I found out, and the most shocking thing to me is the fact that it's not illegal for a league to fix its own game. There's no law that prevents it. Yeah. So without having a law to prevent it, what's stopping it from happening?
Even though they are government funded and they're the NFL at least is nonprofit, right?
Well, no, they're for profit. The headquarters was a nonprofit entity for a while. Okay. They actually finally rescinded that themselves. But there's a difference between the 32 teams and the NFL, which is like the headquarters. Mm-hmm. There's a different thing there. So the NFL, the headquarters, was a nonprofit thing, but the teams were for profit, and they did pay some taxes, but again, not necessarily what they probably should have.
Sure. So how do you say that tennis is one of the bigger ones, at least that we know of in other countries? How do you do that with like these solo sports that are just one-on-one?
Well, to fix a game is really easy. Like you think about a boxing match, for example. Mm-hmm. I mean, we know boxing has been rigged numerous times, and it's still being rigged today. A lot of people don't admit it, but it is. Sure. And so it's really easy. You basically, there's many ways to get to people. I mean, that's one thing I think organized crime has taught us over the years is everybody has a weakness. Mm-hmm. And it's either pure greed, it's the want to get ahead, it's, a drug problem, a gambling problem, a woman problem, a male problem. There's some sort of problem, so you find that weakness and you push on it. Mm-hmm. And so, like, for example, in boxing or tennis, you get a guy who maybe really doesn't have a future. He doesn't have a chance to be the heavyweight champion of the world, or he's not going to be the number one ranked tennis player in the world, but they're still good enough to compete. Well, you start making them, offers. You say, look, if you lose this match to this guy, I'll give you X amount of money, but we'll guarantee you next time you get to fight this guy, and you probably have an easy time of it, and you get a win. And so it's just little deals like that are made. And once you get somebody hooked, well, then you can start doing anything.
Like, is this basically like, at least with like the big sports, are they paying off referees? Are they paying off players? Are they paying off teams? How does that work?
Well, I think, again, I think for game fixing, especially on like the gambling end of things, it's more of a crime of opportunity. Mm-hmm. Because you do stumble across a guy who has some sort of weakness or problem. I don't think a gambler, even a really heavy-duty gambler, could say, well, I'm going to go fix this weekend's game just because I want to. Right. I mean, I think it'd be a really hard thing to do, except maybe in college. College, you could probably do it in because the kids aren't getting paid. But sure. I think elsewhere, it's more of a crime of opportunity. But for the leagues, for example, and I think we've seen this. I think many people have seen it and don't even realize it. But like, especially like in basketball and the NBA into the NFL, the officials are league employees.
Mm-hmm.
And so if the league tells the official, look, like LeBron James, give him more room to work. Don't call fouls on LeBron. Let him do his thing. That's what people want to see anyway. That's basically fixing the game.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're not going to allow the other team to play solid defense against LeBron, if you're going to call a lot of fouls when they do come after LeBron, well, you know what? You're altering the outcome of the game.
Right.
You're fixing it. And the referees know this. And they know what their instructions are, and they know what they mean. And then there's guys who've written a book, I think it was called Scorecasting, that talked about home field advantage and how that actually came into existence. And these guys, they were like Freakonomics guys, they basically came to the realization that the officials were what caused home field advantage. And that home field advantage existed because the referees called fewer fouls and things on the home team, because when the home team won more often, that was more profitable for the team, it was more profitable for the league. Basically, it was good for everybody involved. The unfortunate thing was the authors of this book basically said, well, the referees, just do this on accident, basically, that it's psychological and they're not directed to do so, which I thought was nonsense.
Right.
But that's the thing, is if the league orders its referees to do a certain thing that alters the outcome of a game, that's not illegal. And I think we see that every week. I mean, you watch instant replay in a game, you see it on your 60-inch TV screen at home that a guy was in bounds and the referee tells you he was out of bounds.
Sure.
What are you going to do about it?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So would you say that it is, it's more like watching reality TV where there's, people involved that react to things, but the outcome is kind of planned and people are nudged in that direction and there are some people that are in the know and some people that aren't? Or is it more like WWE or professional wrestling where everybody knows that it's fake?
I don't think everybody knows, and I don't think every game is fixed either.
Sure.
That's not my thing. I don't think certain games just don't matter. They don't matter to the league. They don't matter in the grand scheme of things, so they're allowed to go on as possible. But I think when a league sees a certain storyline come out, I think that's when they say, okay, we're going to try to push this, and we'll give breaks here and there where we can, and maybe we got a player or two that we can control. Certain things. I mean, like a couple years ago when Peyton Manning won the Super Bowl and then retired. I mean, that seemed like it was telegraphed. It seemed like it was telegraphed from the beginning of the season that he was going to go out the Super Bowl champion, and that's what happened. And that was like the story they sold. That's the story they pushed, and that's what we got. So, I mean, that seemed very professional wrestling-like, whereas in other occasions, it just seems like a one-off thing where they want one team to continue on and another team they don't seem to be as interested in go away. So they fix that game so this team propels forward and the other team falls by the wayside.
Sure. Now, I've noticed, as I said very clearly, I don't know sports, but I don't do sports. But I watched the Cubs World Series or whatever, all that. It seems like every single year, from what I hear, things just get more and more grand. Like more and more, the underdog has this shining moment that we never saw coming. The thing that everybody's been begging for, they finally got, and it's a miracle.
Well, it seems like you say, it almost seems like a bigger production every year. That it becomes more and more show business like.
Right.
And like I say, I think that's what the leagues want because that's what sells. I mean, that's what part of it is. A football game is a football game is a football game. If you've seen one, you've kind of almost seen them all. I mean, sure, different things might happen here and there, but I mean, it's a football game.
Right.
So how do you keep making it interesting week after week, year after year, so people keep coming back for more? And I think the only way to do it is to Hollywoodize it, basically. And like you say, make it more of a production, make it more elaborate. And that's why you get more of these stories and you get more of these underdogs and what have you. And that's what sells. And that's what the people are attracted to. So that's what the league provides. And like I say, there's nothing, it makes it very much like reality TV, and they even call it reality TV, but that's what's good for it.
Right. So, like, what's the next step? I mean, they keep building it up and building it up, building it up. Is there, like, do you foresee something crazy happening in sports land?
Well, it happens all the time. I mean, those crazy things happen all the time. I mean, what I think is at some point it should almost implode.
Right.
I mean, because, I've been running my website for, I think it's about 10 years now. And it's amazing how much email I get from the beginning until now of people who are happy that they found my website. And they're like, I thought this way all my life. I'm glad someone's writing about it,
Right.
Because I think, and I get more and more emails like that because, like I say, I think people in a way are seeing through this. because, coincidence can only take you so far. And yet, coincidence always seems to go the league's way, whether it's the NBA's way or the NFL's way or whoever. The ball can only bounce their way so many times. But yet when it happens year after year, season after season, I think it naturally makes people curious as to like, how does this keep working out for the league all the time?
Mm-hmm.
And so they start asking questions. And so I think more and more people are like, what's really going on here?
Absolutely. So do you think that this whole thing is just for the sake of the show, or do you think that there's like other messages? I mean, you said that you're into conspiracies as well. Do you think that there's other messages being tied into it, like propaganda or things like that?
I think it's possible. I mean, like this year's Super Bowl. I mean, it's interesting. You had all year, I'm sure you've heard about the anthem protest, right?
The what?
The anthem protests, the national anthem protests.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, all year we've had these national anthem protests and people getting all upset and not joint about them. And yet now here we are in the Super Bowl and we have the New England Patriots, patriotic name,
Of course.
and the Philadelphia Eagles, the national symbol,
Right.
in the Super Bowl. How much more patriotic can you get, right?
Right.
I mean, that's kind of a weird coincidence that we just wound up with in this year's anthem protest. I mean, you go back further, just even earlier this year, you had Houston get, wrecked by that hurricane, and they came up with this whole Houston Strong idea, and then they went on and won the World Series. Isn't that interesting?
Sure. Yeah.
And, you had same thing with the New Orleans Saints. They had Hurricane Katrina wreck the town. A couple years later, they win the Super Bowl, and it's a grand achievement for the city. I mean, you go to the Boston Marathon bombing, and then immediately after that, the Boston Red Sox win the World Series. And you go back to 9/11, and after 9/11, the Patriots won their first Super Bowl, which is also really patriotic. I mean, I think there is some sort of sometimes subliminal message and propaganda going on with all this, too.
Sure. So the underdog story is not just this team has sucked for the last 30 years and now they won the World Series. The underdog story is, these people, they have it bad, but, America is great or whatever. I mean, I don't really know.
Yeah, look how they rallied together. That's
Sure.
Look how they came together as a community and as a team and how it benefited everybody involved. But
and
I mean,
how good sports makes you feel.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what it is. I mean, and there's an actual, I forget what they call it, basking in reflective glory.
Mm-hmm.
And so what it is as a fan, when your team does well, whichever team you've chosen to identify with, when they do well, you basically feel good.
Right.
Because you feel associated with this. And you hear this all the time. If you listen to sports radio, guys will call in and say, we need to trade for a new pitcher. Or we need to cut the coach. Well,
I worked at a factory for a couple of years. I know exactly what you're talking about. Just sitting in the lunchroom, I'm like, no, you didn't. No, you didn't.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. You're not on the team. They keep saying we, but you're not a member of the team. So it's not we, it's them.
Right. Absolutely.
But because they feel so attached to it, it is we. And that's why when a team does well, it helps those fans.
Right. So, yeah, it's like an addiction, really. It's like
very much.
You are so sucked into it. It's like, I don't know, video games. Like, you are that thing. You have to have that thing. You have to do that thing and be that thing because that's you. That's you.
Well, they're exactly true. And I think the leagues recognize that it is kind of an addiction. Mm-hmm. That guys, are really into their teams and what have you. And I think they take advantage of it. Mm-hmm. Because, I think that's why, you look at a team like the Cubs. Like you mentioned watching the Cub World Series just 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. My dad was a lifelong Cub fan. And he was 80 years old when they won the World Series. For 79 of those years, they were terrible.
Right.
And yet he never let go of that team.
Right.
When he should have. Everybody in your right mind. You shouldn't be a fan of anything if for 79 years they do nothing, Right. And you look at other teams like the Lions and the Browns and other teams in other leagues that just are perpetual losers, and yet those people still show up, fill the seats, wear the T-shirts, the whole kit and caboodle.
Right. Absolutely. Now, how far does this go? First of all, is NASCAR a sport?
Sure.
Okay.
Why not?
It's an ongoing
they call
debate.
Video game playing, a sport now, so sure, why not?
Wow. Yeah. That's. Oh dear.
Haven't you heard of that?
What's that?
Haven't you heard of that? They have esports now.
No,
which is video
I have not.
There's professional video game players now that make way more money than I do, believe it or not.
Professional thumb movers.
Yep.
Good stuff.
And it's called sports.
Good Lord. That might be sports I could get into, but still not sports. So How far does this go? Like NASCAR, is that something that they are into? Do you think there's rigging there too, or is that
Oh,
totally?
I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, NASCAR used to have a thing they called it a legend, which was the call.
Hmm.
And because NASCAR is a privately owned, a lot of people don't know this. NASCAR is actually a privately owned company.
Mm,
One family actually owns NASCAR,
really?
and yeah, the France family. And basically, what the legend of the call is that when a certain sponsor needed help because they were, on the hood of a car or they sponsored a race,
Hmm.
and they wanted an exciting race, NASCAR would call certain drivers and basically say, today's not your day,
Hmm.
and we need this guy to win, and so they would orchestrate certain outcomes. And I
Well,
mean,
with that, is it
yeah,
like multiple drivers that they say no, not
sure,
today?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, it's like horse racing is really rigged. I'm sorry, my phone's ringing in the
Oh, you're
background
fine.
right now.
That's all right. We're
But
real
horse
here.
racing, yeah, but horse racing's really rigged, and it's been rigged for decades because there's gambling involved, and it's easy to do. But the reason why it's so easy to rig at horse races is because the horses don't talk.
Hmm.
The
Right.
horses can't tell you, hey, this jockey's pulling back on me or this jockey's making me do the wrong thing. And it's the same with cars and NASCAR. They can't tell you, hey, this driver's not really putting the pedal to the metal. You just assume the outcome is real because that's what you have in your brain is that the outcome is real.
Sure. How about like Major League Baseball and stuff like that? I mean, I've heard, I listened to a couple of podcasts that you've been on, so I've heard some people's pushback on stuff like that where, it's, is it the whole team? I mean, basically the same question applies to everything.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things where, like I say, I don't think it's every game. I don't think it's every player, every coach, every referee.
Hmm.
Well, maybe every referee, but but not say every coach and every player. I think it's like I say. I think it's for example, if a baseball player tested positive for steroids,
Hmm.
which would get him a big black mark on his record, people would question him. He'd be suspended or whatever. I think the league because the league conducts all those tests. The league determines when they're tested, who's tested, where they're tested. They get the results back. I think a league could basically get the positive result on a player, bring him in, and say, look, we can either out you as a steroid user or a cocaine user or
Hmm.
whatever, or you do this favor for us and we make this go away.
Right.
What do you want to
Blackmail,
do?
cult, mob mentality type stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, but how hard is that? I mean,
Right.
you're a guy who makes, whatever, even if you're only making the league minimum of $500,000 a year, or you're the guy making $10 million a year. Do you want that black mark against you, or are you willing to, lay down in a game
Right.
because the league needs a certain outcome?
Sure.
What's it worth?
Right.
I mean, I think a lot of people would be hard pressed to stick to their guns and say, "I'll take the suspension. I'm not doing your dirty work."
Yeah. I mean, do they lose anything for throwing a game? The players?
Not in well, according to sports, it never happens.
Hmm.
So no, there's nothing to lose. That's the scary part. I mean, the NFL's been around for nearly 100 years. They claim not one of their games has been fixed ever.
Sure. Sure.
That there's been no outside influence on any game at any time in their history.
Even if it
Which,
wasn't a grand conspiracy like you're talking, I mean,
yeah, even if it was just a
it's
gambler
human nature.
private
It has
guy
to happen
back
at
in the
some
50s.
point.
Yeah, well, exactly. But they say no, it's never happened. Baseball says it hasn't happened in 100 years either.
Hmm.
And I find that ridiculous because, again, like I said earlier, you look at soccer, tennis, cricket, rugby, all these sports around the world, they're being fixed all over the world. I mean, the World Cup in soccer is the most watched sporting event in the world. And we know matches at the World Cup have been fixed. I mean, we know this. So the biggest sporting event, the biggest sport in the world, we know has been fixed. And then somebody's telling me you can't fix a regular season NBA game. Come on.
Right. Now you say we know. Is there like documentation? Has it been
Yeah.
like debunked or whatever?
No, it's been proven that these matches have been fixed.
Okay.
I mean, and like I say, in soccer, I forgot what it was. There was a stat not too long ago, maybe a year, 2 or 3 years ago, when they said there was a match fixing investigation going on in, I think, 50 different countries of the world at the same time.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, there's 200 countries in the world, so literally a quarter of the world has a match fixing investigation, like on a police level, ongoing at that time.
So
And
what's the difference between them and us? Like, why are we insisting that this is not happening, even though that stuff's still going on, the soccer stuff's still going on, and it's everybody knows it, and it's still the biggest watched thing in the world. Why are we?
I think the reason it's not a big deal in the United States is because the sports media won't let it be.
Okay.
I mean, I really think that's it. And I can get into it here, but I mean, literally, I don't think the ESPNs of the world want this to be known because they're invested in it.
Right.
I mean, like one of the most corrupt leagues in soccer is basically the Italian professional league, which is called Serie A soccer.
Sure.
And I mean, it's literally proven, like with police investigations and what have you in Italy, for like 15 years worth of games were being rigged, and they were being rigged by players, referees, coaches, team owners were involved. I mean, it was just corrupt from top to bottom. And then I think Fox Sports came in and paid something like $50 million to broadcast their games here in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But did they ever once tell everybody, oh, by the way,
right,
for the past 15 years, this league has been totally corrupt?
Right.
No, they never said boo about it. And they still won't say boo about it now. And it's the same with, ESPN giving the NFL $2 billion a year and giving the NBA over nearly $2 billion a year as well. Are they really going to then turn around and investigate the league and say, oh, by the way, this league is totally corrupt?
Right.
No, they just spent $2 billion investing in it. I mean,
Right.
They're funding these leagues, so they're not going to do the investigative work they should to reveal the corruption that's within it.
Hey, Dan Smots here. I'm taking a second to interrupt myself talking to talk about myself because, I don't get paid a penny for the hours and hours that I put into creating this show for you guys in your greedy little ears, and I've got a family to feed. To make that happen, I run my own media business called Goulash Media. If you have a need in anything from video production to graphic design to audio production and beyond, you can get it all for a painfully fair price at Goulash Media. In video, I do weddings, music videos, commercials, pageants, plays, etc., etc., etc. For design, I do photo editing, album art, logos, branding, business cards, merchandise, you name it. For audio, I do engineering, production, editing, jingles, and, well, podcasts. So if you've got a media need of any kind, or if you'd just like to give a little something back and help keep my children fed, check out all the endless options at my website, goulashmedia.net. That's goulash, Goulash, media.net, where we cater to the little guy with the big vision. Okay. Now, how about things like the Olympics or winter sports and things like that? Do you think it goes to that extreme where the Olympics are being rigged too?
The sad thing is I played a couple years ago in a recreational softball league in my town, and there were teams there that cheated. There were teams that used like an illegal bat so the ball would travel 100 feet further than they should.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've seen Little League Baseball where they recruit, 14-year-olds to play in the 12-year-old league. I mean, the sad truth with sports is, even though we want to say it's about pure competition and the best beating the best, people cheat everywhere. If they can get away with it, they try to cheat. So
if there's people in the sport, the answer is yes, somebody's cheating.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, it's unfortunate, but wherever you look in sports, like you say, someone's cheating. And so, when people say, well, this sport's clean and that sport's clean, it's like, you probably just haven't dug far enough.
Right.
Because, you look, there's
or you
corruption
have
in
an
government.
emotional tie to it and you don't want to admit that it's happening.
You don't want to know. Yeah, exactly. Because, there's corruption in government, there's corruption in business, there's corruption, unfortunately, in religion.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we think sports is clean?
Right. Absolutely. So I've heard you talk in some of your discussions about you've actually, this is not just speculation, you've actually dug into FBI documentation and uncovered some things. Can you tell us some about that?
Well, it's a long story, but
sure.
The basic gist of it was after I wrote the fixes in and people kept telling me that, games couldn't be fixed and they never were fixed and blah, blah, blah. I found out that the FBI did a lot of investigation actually into professional sports and college sports being rigged. Mm-hmm. And so what I did is through the Freedom of Information Act, I obtained every file that the FBI had relating to game fixing in professional sports.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me about 2 years. I got well over 400 files from the FBI, and a lot of
what
them.
What is the process to obtain that information?
Well, actually, I requested so many files, they put me on a special list. I was on this, what they called the Vexum filer list, which basically meant I was a nuisance to the FBI.
Which means you're asking too many questions.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, and I'm not joking. It was literally like me and 30 other guys.
Nice.
Yeah, I was on this really exclusive list with the FBI. But what he had to do is, and I'm swear I'm not making this up, is, the FBI doesn't work like Google. You can't just say, give me all your files on the NFL, and they go, okay, here.
Right.
You have to kind of learn how the system works and how to ask for things. And like I said, I'm not making this up. I literally got help from a guy who works for a secret government agency.
Okay.
Who that's what he told me. And after he told me what he worked for and what he did, I was like, oh, this guy's not making this up.
Okay.
But he helped me organize how to make these requests and how to get the information I wanted. And once he gave me kind of like the key and unlocked it for me, then I was able to get everything I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, like I say, it was literally over 400 files, and it spanned about 20 years.
Nice.
Because believe it or not, the FBI actually quit investigating for fixed games back in the 80s. They basically stopped.
What was their reason to begin with for investigating it? I mean, if it's a privately owned business.
Well, what happened was back in 1964, Congress passed a law which is called the Sports Bribery Act.
Okay.
And that basically, it made it a federal crime to bribe a coach, an athlete, or a referee to alter the outcome of a game. And the key word is bribe, because like I said earlier, if a league tells its employee, the referee, to alter the outcome of a game, they're not being bribed.
Right.
So that's not a crime. But if you or I did it and paid the guy money to do it, then it's a crime, and it's a federal crime. And so when that law passed in 64, that made it the FBI's problem.
Mm-hmm.
So the FBI immediately sent out all these agents, and they started building, associations with bookmakers and gamblers and organized crime members, and they built this whole network of informants, and they started getting really credible information about all these different athletes who were working with gamblers or organized crime members and were fixing games.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the problem with that is even though they had this great information, it wasn't enough to necessarily, make an arrest and then get a conviction, because it was all almost like hearsay.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if they said, okay, this player is working with this referee or this gambler, and they're going to fix this game on Sunday, and the player had a really bad game on Sunday, and they lost by the point spread and all that, it didn't mean it really was fixed.
Right.
It could have just been the guy had a bad game by coincidence.
Sure.
So they needed, like a wiretap, or they needed a confession, or they needed something like that to really go forward, and they unfortunately could never get that stuff. And so after 20 years, basically, of trying and failing, the FBI quit.
Sure.
They said enough. And at
It's a hard thing to prove.
Yeah, and so at the same time, Reagan was tasking them with fighting the war on drugs.
Mm-hmm.
So they put all their efforts into drugs investigations and basically said, look, if we come across something, we'll investigate it, but we're kind of out of this business now. We're not going to dig around ourselves. But all the information they had, which is what I obtained, I mean, it's literally thousands upon thousands upon thousands of pages, is incredible stuff.
Awesome. I'm sure I would be remiss, and my listeners would be yelling at me if I didn't backpedal a little bit and ask you about this mystery man of the secret government agency a little bit.
There's not much I can tell you about him, unfortunately. Sure. But he really did work for a secret government agency.
Not asking you to tell me what it is, but do you know what it is?
Yeah,
what the agency
he told me.
Okay.
And the funny thing is, I can't tell you, but the funny thing is, it's really not that impressive.
Okay.
I mean, it's not like he was like some weird CIA offshoot type of thing. I mean, it was just kind of this weird little government agency, but I was able he told me one thing that I was able to confirm with this other guy I know, who was like, oh yeah, I've heard of that. I don't think that guy's making that up. So
nice.
There really are secret government agencies, and
sure.
This guy happened to work for one.
Gotcha. Now, how did you come across or come in contact with this guy?
The internet, the good old internet,
sure.
Just stumble. It was like one of those things where I was doing research about Freedom of Information Act stuff, mm-hmm. and trying to figure out how to work this system and how to get what I wanted. And, through a link of a link of a link type of thing, I wound up on this website, and I contacted the person who was running it, because it said, contact me if you have questions. So I emailed the guy. He emailed me back like 30 seconds later, and he said, call me. And he gave me a phone number. So I called the guy, and it happened to be this gentleman who worked for the secret government agency, and he gave me all this great info. So
Sure.
he was friendly as can be, but interesting,
Awesome.
interesting guy for sure.
Yeah, for sure. That's very cool. Now with the FBI files that you dug through, did you find like specifically incriminating things? I know it's hard to prove. Did you find anything that's like this is happening, or at least we strongly suspect that this is happening? Can you give like some specifics on that?
Well, one of the things they had, for example, was like two basketball legends, Wilt Chamberlain. You ever hear him?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and Bill Russell, who's another NBA legend.
Sure.
The FBI, through their informants, basically were told unequivocally that these two guys were betting on basketball games in which they played. Okay, which they're both Hall of Famers. So if you think Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame because he bet on baseball and was kicked out, but still should be allowed in the Hall of Fame, that's one thing. But if you think Pete Rose should be kept out of the Hall of Fame for his betting, well then Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain should be kicked out tomorrow.
Sure.
Because the FBI had extremely credible evidence that they were gambling on games in which they played, and the FBI even had evidence that they were betting against themselves.
Really?
But the thing for the FBI was because it wasn't a third party bribing them to do bad, but that these guys were betting themselves. The FBI was like, well, you know what? That's not a crime. So it's not our problem. So they just dropped it. They basically said the NBA can go investigate these guys if they want, but it's not our problem because we investigate federal crimes. They're not committing a crime. What they might be doing isn't good.
Right.
It's not good for basketball. It's not good for anything, but it's not our problem.
Sure.
And so they ran across this several times where they basically found really good evidence, and it just wasn't a problem because these players back in the 60s were betting on themselves to make extra money. So they didn't care. But for another example I found was, and this is, I think, an interesting story, is one of the files mentioned the New York Knicks in the early 1980s, where three members of the Knicks were shaving points as a favor to their cocaine dealer, which is a nice thing to do. The guy gives you coke, you shave a few points for him.
Sure. Now this is a thing that I've heard a lot in the discussion that you've had, and I don't know what shaving points is. So could you briefly break that down so I know where we're at?
The best way to describe it is, when you bet on a basketball or football game, there's what they call a point spread. So like in the NFL, like a common point spread may be like 3 points. So if the Bears are playing the Packers might be favored by 3 points.
Sure.
Which means if you bet on the Packers, you're going to deduct 3 points from your score. So if the Packers won 28-21, you deduct 3 points from the Packers score or add 3 points to the Bears score, either way. And that has to, overcome. So like if the Packers were favored by 3, they won 28-21, they covered that 3-point spread, you won your bet. But if it was a 7-point spread and it was a 28-21 game, well, then you pushed because they would come out even. You'd add 7 points to the Bears, they'd have 28. Packers would have 28. Your bet would push. So what happens is a lot of times when you're shaving points, and this happens a lot in college, is you don't necessarily want the player, you're not asking them to lose the game outright. You're asking them basically in the betting world to lose the game by the point spread.
Sure.
So if it's like the Packer Bear thing, and you don't care if you want the Packers to win the game, you're telling the player, hey, don't lose the game, but don't cover that point spread. So the player may do bad. So instead of winning 28-21 as the Packers should have, the guy fixes the game and the Packers win 28-24.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So that way with the point spread, if you bet on the Bears, you won, but the Packers still won the game.
Sure.
So on one level, it's a win. On another level, it may be a loss. But that's what I mean by point shaving.
Gotcha.
So they're just kind of doing a little worse than they should because of the gambling involved in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, gotcha. I'm learning stuff already.
So like I was saying with the Knicks thing, these guys were shaving points as a favor to their cocaine dealer, and the FBI saw that the cocaine dealer went from betting $500 a game to betting $10,000 a game.
Jeez.
And was winning left and right.
Right.
And
Make it more obvious.
It was weird. Yeah, exactly. It was totally obvious. The funny thing is the FBI's investigation fell apart.
Yeah.
So I wrote this up in this book, Larceny Games, which is all about these FBI files, and nobody cared. I write all these things up about, like I say, about the Wilt Chamberlain stuff, the Bill Russell stuff, NFL Hall of Famers, all this stuff, and nobody, ESPN, no, despite the fact that like ESPN, HBO Sports, I even talked to somebody from 60 Minutes about my book.
Hmm.
Nobody covered the book in any way, shape, or form. But then the New York Post found this little bit in my book about these New York Knicks shaving points, and they made it like a back page cover story, and suddenly the whole thing like went viral.
Nice.
It was on all these different places, but the one place it didn't show up was ESPN, who happened to be the broadcast partner of the NBA.
Of course.
So I mean, I just find it amazing that here's something that was kind of in a way groundbreaking information, something that no one had ever done before, that revealed all this dirt on all these players.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody paid attention to it, like intentionally didn't pay attention to it. And then when finally something did come out, it went crazy. People were all excited about it. But then still places like ESPN said, no, we're not going to touch that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
I mean,
telling.
it's amazing. Too, that, the New York Post, proved everything I wrote.
Mm-hmm.
When they went to the FBI, I mean, they basically confirmed everything I did, and yet still nobody cared.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like we said before, the fans, they don't want to know. Just like WWE fans, they don't want to know. They don't want to think about it being as clearly fake as it clearly is. Just let them stay in their bubble. Leave them alone.
Well, but the one thing is, a lot of sports fans do tell me that they feel that the WWE is the most honest of all sports, because they do basically admit, look, this is just entertainment. It's a show.
Right.
Come for the show. These are really good athletes. Don't get them wrong. They're great athletes, but it's a show.
Right. That's a very good point. So this episode is going to come out on Monday. We're recording this on the Tuesday before. By that point, if I am correct on what I hear, I could be totally wrong, but the Super Bowl is Sunday, correct?
Yep. That's
okay.
Correct, yes.
So this is coming out the day after the Super Bowl. Do you have thoughts, predictions, like anything on how anything for people to watch for or to go back and watch for when this comes out in the Super Bowl?
That's right, because it'll be a day after. Yeah, it'll be too late. This is actually this year the whole NFL playoffs kind of threw me for a loop. To be honest, I thought it was going to go one way, and it kind of went a totally different way, and it wound up with the Eagles and the Patriots, which is not what I expected whatsoever. So I really don't have a prediction.
Sure.
And that way I don't get in trouble either, because what happens to me when I make predictions is if I'm right, then I always hear, well, everybody knew that was going to happen.
Right.
So, what kind of prediction was that? And then if I'm wrong, then the people who think I'm nuts for talking about this conspiracy theory say, well, then you didn't know what you're talking about, because you didn't know who was going to win.
Right.
So predictions never do me well. But
right.
I really don't have one. I mean, I could see either team winning this game, and I could, make reasons as to why the NFL might want the Patriots to win or why they might want the Eagles to win. But to me, neither story is very compelling.
Sure.
So I don't see why they necessarily push certain buttons.
Sure. Is either one? I don't follow either one. Are either of the teams do they have like a big underdog story or anything up to this point?
Well, the Eagles definitely do.
Do they?
The Eagles are definitely the underdog, and they have that kind of Cinderella story because their starting quarterback at the beginning of the year, Carson Wentz, blew out his knee around 12th week of the season. So they've had this backup quarterback leading them throughout the playoffs and into the Super Bowl. So this Nick Foles, their backup quarterback, is kind of a Cinderella story type of guy. Mm-hmm. And it is something that, nobody really cares about Nick Foles besides maybe Nick Foles' family. But it is kind of the story that the NFL has to sell, is that, if you want to root for the underdog, you root for the Eagles, because basically the Patriots are the evil empire, and I think a lot of fans are sick of hearing about them.
Sure. So it's an interesting point you bring up. The only people who care about him is his family and his friends. People don't even think about the fact that is 99% of the people in professional sports, and there's always one dude that everybody focuses on. Do you think that there's any sort of plan behind that, or is that intentional, that we have the Michael Jordans, the Kobe Bryants, the whatever, and then everybody else is just kind of their wingmen at best?
I think there are certain guys who definitely have talents that nobody else in the world had. I think, like you say, the Michael Jordans of the world, he was a special talent. Mm-hmm. That guy could really play basketball. LeBron James is really, really good and plays at another level. And I think what it is, because I have people ask me, like, sometimes they'll email and say, why doesn't my team, why hasn't it had success in 30 years?
Yeah.
And I think what it is, like when they do draft players, some teams get lucky and they wind up with the LeBron James or the Michael Jordans of the world, and other teams wind up with guys who really aren't that talented.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when the league sees a talent emerge, when they see, a Michael Jordan emerge, or when they see LeBron James emerge, then they try to maximize that guy's talent because they can't make it up out of nothing. I mean, I think they tried to do that with like Tim Tebow a couple of years back when he became a sensation for about 6 weeks, but he really wasn't that talented.
Yeah.
So, they could only fake it for so long. So I think that's what they need is they need true talents to be able to push and to be able to do things that they want them to do. And then they just start letting the referees back off and letting those players do what they can do because that's what people want to see. And I mean, I don't blame them. It's entertainment. But I think that's how they do it is I think these talents do emerge and then the league kind of, crafts stories and stuff around them.
Sure. Absolutely. So the last time I paid any attention to any sports, I followed the Bulls back when Michael Jordan was a thing, and I was into that at the time. I was a young child, but haven't really paid any attention to any of it since then. You see these things where these sports heroes, they will be huge, then they will retire, then they will come back. They might buy a team, and they might, play for the Wizards or whatever. And does any of that play into, like, do you think trying to spread out the wealth? Like, is that planned, or is that all kind of on the level?
No, I think some of that is planned. I mean, there was back in the NHL, for example, Wayne Gretzky, who's kind of a household name and really pretty much one of the best players ever to play hockey.
Yeah.
I think he originally started on the Edmonton Oilers, which nobody cares about the Edmonton Oilers. They're in the middle of nowhere, Canada, And
Right.
he got traded to the Los Angeles Kings. What was that? Probably right around 1990-ish, I think. And I think that whole trade was orchestrated to get Gretzky out of Edmonton and put him in a prime market like Los Angeles, because then he would do way more for the league and do way more for hockey than he would playing in the middle of nowhere, Canada.
Right.
So I think certain times some of these guys are moved around, and that happens a lot. But I think some of the times it is because, again, he's a commodity. And even the sad thing is, I mean, the greatest hockey player of all time, and the owner who owned the Oilers at the time when he traded Gretzky basically said he's a commodity. They didn't necessarily even see him as a person; he saw him as a thing.
Right.
So he's like, I just look at some of these sometimes so that they're things, and they can move them around and use them as they need to, and then throw them away when they're done.
Do you think that is the case with Michael Jordan doing baseball as well, randomly?
Well, that's a totally different thing. I honestly, I know that Michael Jordan's first retirement was nonsense.
Sure.
That he was actually asked basically to step away from basketball because he had a serious gambling problem.
Sure.
And they didn't want him to become like Pete Rose, who got kicked out and banished from baseball. That there were meetings between Jordan, the owner of the Bulls, Jerry Reinsdorf, and the commissioner at the time, who was David Stern, and they basically made Jordan go away for a while.
Really?
And that whole ball thing was a ruse just so he could kind of stay in the limelight, but at the same time get him out of basketball, because there were investigations going around because he was busted basically gambling on golf with a known cocaine dealer who I believe was actually Jordan's cocaine supplier.
Sure.
And other gambling issues as well. And so they made it all go away. As soon as he retired, all the investigations into Jordan went away. Then they trotted him back out, whatever it was, a year later, and everything was good. And he went on to win 3 more championships, and everybody loved him and blah, blah, blah. But the fact is, he was probably a cocaine-addicted gambler who should have been kicked out of the league. But because he was McDonald's, he was Nike, he was Chevrolet, and he was more than just the NBA, they protected him because he meant money to a lot of people.
Gotcha. I've heard comedians and different people bring up Michael Jordan's gambling addiction, just kind of in passing. Is there like solid evidence of that, or stuff that you found?
Well, there's definitely evidence that he gambles a lot. I mean, in one of his one of the biographies about him. I know one guy wrote about how, and it's known, he plays poker all the time, like big poker tournaments. And in this biography, they talked about how much money he was playing blackjack with. I mean, like played for like $75,000-$100,000 a hand. I mean, he was blowing money gambling. The question is, and even the golf thing, they knew he was losing gambling at golf with these local pros and semi-pros and stuff. The question was he gambling on sports, and was he gambling on the NBA? That was something that never really came to light, whether he was doing either or. But the fact of the matter is, it's pretty well proven that he does have, a want to gamble, that's for sure. Would I call it an addiction? I don't know. But he definitely enjoys gambling, and he's gone through a lot of money doing it.
Sure. Which is, if you weren't Michael Jordan, that would be definition of addiction.
Exactly. Well, Charles Barkley, he also has a problem with gambling. He owed like a casino, I forget what it was, $1 million or more, I think. I can't remember exactly how much. And he said, I don't have a gambling problem because I can afford to lose that money. But that's not the difference from the problem, Charles. Problem is you can't stop yourself from gambling. That's the problem.
Sure. Now back to Super Bowl stuff. As a person who's interested in conspiracies in general as well, do you pay attention to things like the Super Bowl halftime show? A lot of people claim that there's symbolism in those. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I've had a lot of people email me about that sort of thing, but honestly, that's not something I dig into.
Sure.
But I have seen, there's, people talk about the Illuminati and the hand signs and the whole spectacle, the Super Bowl halftime show. And you do have to remember, the Super Bowl is the most watched television event every year.
Right.
And it's the most, watched television event really in American history. So if you were going to put on such a display, that's the best time to do it.
Right.
Because you get the most eyes on it. So, again, that's not my thing, but would it surprise me? No, not at all.
Sure. Gotcha. Well, fantastic. Do you have any final thoughts and anything you want to plug? Tell everybody where they can find your stuff.
If people are interested in reading more of my work or finding my books, or even if they want to email me and ask me questions and that sort of thing, I always answer. The best place to go is my website, which is thefixesin.net, and you can find everything there.
Fantastic. Well, Brian, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And, if you have a new book or anything else coming out in the future, feel free to hit me up. You're more than welcome here.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I should have a new book about this time next year. It should be out.
Fantastic. Hit me up. I'm more than willing.
Cool. All right. Sounds great.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Have a good one.
You too.
Hey guys, thanks for sticking around to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to check out Brian and all of his work, you can find it at thefixesin.net. There will be links to that and everything else that we talked about in the show notes at tsidpod.com. Also, if you want to chat about the Super Bowl, conspiracies, politics, religion, anything else that comes to mind, you can come join our free forum by going to tsidpod.com/forum or typing in the System is Down forum on Facebook and asking to join. Also, once again, don't wait another day to sign up for the Downers Club. It is $1 and you're getting probably 16, 17, 18 hours of audio content for $4 a month. So go check that out. Help keep the show going. I really appreciate everybody who's already in there. You guys are awesome. You're helping get the name out there. Keep up the good work. If you'd like to join, just go to tsidpod.com/support and get in the Downers Club. And as always, please subscribe and review the show on iTunes. That is a great and cost-free way to help support the show, help us build legitimacy in the podcasting world. Also, please follow, like, share, subscribe, do all the stuff that millennials do on Facebook and Twitter. Our Facebook is fb.com/thesystemisdown, and our Twitter handle is @TSIDpod. So please do all of that, and I'll be back here first thing next week with some more uncomfortable conversations. Until then, question everything and stay uncomfortable. Thanks. This has been a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
This concludes our broadcast day. Click.